Over the summer, we've been combining abolition and history and how what happened back then in abolition also correlates to what's happening now and what we also want to achieve now.
The program I'm part of this summer is called Abolition Museum. So Abolition Museum is just topics that we feel have been kind of pushed off and discarded to just bring them up and talk about them in more settings where people usually wouldn't talk about them.
As youth activists, it really brings the focus onto us as youth and our new generation for ideas, for how we want to change the world, how we want to change our system, and everything else in between.
Some of the things we strive to achieve in this program are abolition of things like schools. I think communities will learn more and better from a system that's not traditional because it won't leave us in this little closed-in white box where we only learn about these white things inside of this white space, but instead it expands our horizon to learn more about spaces that were created for us.
So why do you think you don't have a voice in your school?
The way that our schools are similar to prisons, the structure that we've created isn't benefiting us in the way that it was intended to, and so again, like the power, flipping the power.
I want to hear more about, you flipping this triangle and students on top, and how are you going to make that happen?
So, I like my school because we do more one-on-one work with that, and they'll take the time to learn our interests and work and push our interests along instead of just making us a big crowd and we learn all the same things and they push us out to the next step. Taking the power away from these teachers and everything else, and instead having them more put the energy towards helping the students and more one-on-one assistance into their future so they can truly make a difference in what they want to do. Taking that more as the students are in control of their learning and students are in control of what they want to do with their futures.
I think Detroit particularly has always been central in Black liberation movements and still remains to be in the US one of the cities that have been able to be almost majority Black still. I think we've seen ideally this model of how do we make communal space, particularly in Black communities, where people are having these intellectual conversations about theory and practice.
So the first thing I wanted to introduce you to is this concept called praxis. Theory and practice equals praxis. And this comes from a guy named Paulo Freire, who wrote a book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed. So Paulo Freire, when he comes up with praxis, he's talking about the necessity of going to those people who are not thought of as in the academy, in the university, which is where he's coming out of, as super educated. He's saying actually they know a lot more about the world than we do, than people from the academy, because they're experiencing it. And so their practice and their theory is actually the more powerful combination.
Abolition and learning in a non-traditional way, I think they go hand in hand because schools are built on systems of tradition. And so we should abolish these systems because, as we've seen, they don't work for these communities. Traditional limits us to these white boxes and these white spaces when they should be bigger and they should fit in more colors.
This non-traditional way of learning should become the new norm. I definitely feel like this way of learning has hit different and it has made it more enjoyable to learn more about the facts of Detroit than just sitting and reading a book or watching a video, because it doesn't sink in for a lot of students like the hands-on and the real work does.
Even with this group of young folks, they're so dynamic, but they're having these high-level conversations that even my graduate students sometimes can't have, right, or aren't prepared to have yet. And I think they are reminding us, one, of just how much they're the experts of their lives, right? They're experiencing these things, and so they deserve to have access to these resources and language, and being able to also add and contribute their own language and ideals and theory to how we're thinking about social justice, how we're thinking about freedom, how we're thinking about creating a better world.
This has been a life-changing moment for me based on what I've been learning and how I've been raised up. And I definitely feel like abolition isn't talked about enough within our schools and our school systems. So if we get more education on this, especially the hands-on like this, it would make more of a difference for a lot more students, including myself.
I think it's really important for all communities to create spaces for their intersectionality. You might not be able to create a huge space that can really change a nation, but you can create something for your community. But you as a person, you as an individual, you can make a huge difference inside of your community by just being you.